Hey, this is Jarrett from the Underwater Garage YouTube channel. The project we're working on today is recharging the AC system after a front end wreck damaged the AC condenser. Be sure to give us a like, follow, and share. If you like this type of automotive content, we'll be posting new videos every week. In order to accomplish this job, at a minimum, you're going to need the following tools and materials. You're going to need a vacuum pump, as well as a set of air conditioning manifold gauge set and hoses. You're also going to need an AC can tap, obviously your refrigerant, and vacuum pump oil for the vacuum pump. It's also nice to have an AC temperature probe to put in the cooling vent to see how cold your AC is getting, but it's not necessary. So the first step in recharging the AC system is to connect all the hoses and valves to the AC manifold set, as shown here. You've got your low side here, and then your high side. And you also need to connect the yellow hose where we're going to insert the refrigerant at. And I've also gone ahead and set up our vacuum pump. What you want to do with the vacuum pump too is make sure that you've got oil shown on the sight glass here. You don't want to run your vacuum pump with no oil. The next thing we want to do is identify where we're going to connect our service hoses to. On this 99 Jeep XJ, our low service port is right here, and then our high service port is right here. We're going to pop these two temporary hose connections off and then connect those to the service ports. So now we have all of our hoses connected to the service ports, the manifold, and to the vacuum pump. It's important to note at this stage that these valves both need to be turned all the way open to where they're not opening the Schrader valves inside the service ports. And then these valves need to be completely closed, coming this way. The next step is going to be to turn on the vacuum pump and let it evacuate any moisture that's in the system for at least an hour. It's important to note that if the system is already charged with refrigerant, it should be collected by a professional. It's not great to let it just go to the atmosphere. Since this system has already been opened and does not have any refrigerant in it, I can go directly to pulling a vacuum and evacuating any moisture that's trapped in it before I refill it with refrigerant. First thing I need to do is make sure that both of these valves are screwed all the way in. That opens the Schrader valve in the service port, here and here. Get it to close. Okay, so now both of those are open. Now I also need to go ahead and open both of these. It's going to open coming from the lines up through our valve going to our vacuum pump. So now with all those open, now we can take and turn on our vacuum pump. And we should see the low pressure side start to go below zero as it pulls a vacuum. And we want to let this go until it gets all the way to a stopping point. And once it does that, we'll isolate all of the valves and we'll let it sit for 30 minutes to see if we have any leaks in the system. If we don't, then we'll come back and let the vacuum pump run continuously for an hour to evacuate any moisture, and then we'll be ready to charge the system. So I pulled a vacuum on the system and then isolated the two valves on the manifold and let it sit for 30 minutes, and it held about negative 20 inches of mercury. So I don't think that the system has any large leaks in it, and I'm good to proceed to pulling a vacuum on it again for an hour to finish evaporating any moisture out of the system before I continue with charging it with new refrigerant. So the next step will be actually adding new refrigerant to the system. On your vehicle, there should be a sticker similar to this one that tells you how much refrigerant you'll need to charge the system with. For this Jeep, it's 1.25 pounds, or about 20 ounces. So I've connected my first bottle of refrigerant to the yellow hose after I removed it from the vacuum pump. So now that we have the system completely evacuated and a vacuum pulled on it, I've connected our first can of new refrigerant. It's important when you do this that the valve handle on your can tap is completely in the up position so that you don't release any of the refrigerant before you're ready to. You also need to come up to your manifold and make sure that these two valves are completely closed before you open the can tap. After this, we can come down to our refrigerant can and close our tap, which is going to charge the yellow line with fresh refrigerant. Just like that. Now with a pin or something similar, we need to take and depress the valve here until we get only clean refrigerant out. There's also air still trapped in the yellow line from when we did the vacuum. At this point, we're ready to actually turn on the engine, turn on the AC system, and begin pulling new refrigerant into the system. It's important to note that before you start the engine, you should make sure that none of your hoses are going to contact any parts of the engine that are going to start moving when we turn it on. Now we come inside the vehicle and we need to turn it on and then also turn the AC on to max and max cold. So take and start it. And come over here and turn the AC on, recirculate, and turn it to max, and also make sure that's completely cold. Now with the engine running, we can come up here and open our low side service port, and it's going to begin drawing fresh refrigerant into the system. You can see we start building pressure right there, and eventually the AC compressor will kick on once it builds enough pressure. We want to do this slowly so we don't risk overpressuring the system. You can barely see the refrigerant starting to flow in there. Ah, there's the compressor, okay. So it just turned on. See, it's starting to draw more in. Going to keep doing this until the bottle of our refrigerant fills empty. We haven't got there yet. Okay, so the can feels pretty empty now. I'm going to isolate this can correctly, put another can in, and then we'll come back and continue adding refrigerant until we see proper pressure on the high and low side of the system. So in order to change between cans of refrigerant, the first thing you need to do is completely close your low side, and then come down to your can and completely close your valve on your can tap. At that point, you can unscrew the can here. Because our pressures are still under the recommended ranges, we're going to continue adding refrigerant. The first thing we need to do this is to open our can tap here and then evacuate any air out of the yellow line by pressing that valve again, right there in the middle, the little Schrader valve. After we do that, we can open our low side service valve and continue to pull in refrigerant until we see these levels and pressures get to where they need to be. So now with the system completely charged, our pressures are 35 on the low side and 200 on the high side, which is within spec. So now let's go inside and see how cold the AC is coming out of the vents. So now with the AC at full blast, at idle sitting still, it looks like we're about 50 degrees, which is a lot better than it was before Lauren had her accident. It would only get down to about 70 degrees. So I'm going to call this a win. It's important to reinstall the service port cover caps before you finish so that no road grime or dirt gets into your service ports. This will impact you the next time you need to service your AC system. This is a fairly easy job. The only things you have to buy are the can tap, the vacuum pump oil, if the vacuum pump at your O'Reilly's doesn't already have oil in it, and your refrigerant. What's great about this is you can rent all the tools like the manifold and the vacuum pump from O'Reilly's and then return them after you're done. Well, that was the AC recharge on Lauren's Jeep. I'm super happy with how it turned out. If you like what you saw, give us a like, follow, and a share. We post new content like this every week. Also, I'm going to include a link in the video description for Chris Fix's video on how to perform the same service. It's a little bit more in depth than my video. If you feel like I missed anything, you'll probably find the answer you're looking for in his video. Thanks, guys.